Welcome to Arabs in Media, an independently produced podcast discussing how Arabs are featured in news and entertainment. Our guest today is the author of The History We Carry and is the co-founder of the National Arab Institute. In October of this year, a video her team produced went viral. This video imagines the future 15 years from now in 2040, a 15-year commemoration around the world of a Gaza genocide, which is a real thing. It's a somber, haunting video. It features children around the world with their parents at museums and film showings asking their parents, where were you when this happened and why didn't you do anything about it? We'll feature the video in the Arabs in Media Substack. Please support independent media and Arabs in Media by going to our Substack, not only to watch that video, but to read the accompanying article about this and to receive updates and to be able to comment and interact with us. Mariam Sallam, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining Arabs in Media. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. As best as we can through a genocide.
Yeah.
The video was a trailer to an exhibit called the Bulletproof Dreams Exhibit, which is about untold stories of Gaza through the art of children. Tell me a little bit about what that is and how it got started.
Yeah. So the Bulletproof Dreams exhibit is an exhibit that was created because there was a little girl in Gaza. Her name is Mona. I think she's around the age of 6. She saw her mother get shot by the IDF. And a journalist found her, picked her up, and took her to a safe space and then gave her, paper and crayons, just so that she can kind of feel like a child, because children in Gaza have very little moments where they can actually be children. And she ended up drawing her mother's death. She drew the IDF shooting her mother. Like, imagine a 6-year-old, you should be drawing like rainbows on houses. And she's drawing the death of her mother. So the journalist was very struck by this, and he said, the kids probably have a lot to say. No one's really listening to them. So he got kids in that same area, that same shelter, paper and crayons, and they all drew images of war. And he took these pictures and he smuggled them out of Gaza with a team. And I think 6 or 7 of these people died smuggling these pictures out of Gaza. They made their way to Turkey, which is where the Bulletproof Dreams team originates. And they were able to, with the help of the Turkish government, they were able to digitize these drawings on an LED screen. We had the exhibit up for a month. The president of Turkey's wife opened this exhibit, and now we would like to bring this exhibit to America. Looking back at that 2040 video, if you go through the comments, one thing that really struck me was a lot of people were writing like, the Germans or the Europeans would never give us a memorial, or the Germans or the Europeans would never do an exhibit to commemorate our people. And it's like, you can do that. You don't need the colonizing power to help you create art or to give you a space to tell your story. You have to reclaim your story and then believe that it's important enough to tell, and then tell it. That 2040 video is kind of just like, to tell people this is what we could do with our voices. This is the stories that we have to preserve for our people.
Have you gotten any pushback on the idea of doing this?
Oh, so much pushback, especially from the Arab community. So I know that's really surprising. So there are 2 camps in the Arab community, right? There's the camp of like, we have to do this, we have to preserve our history, we have to tell our stories. And then there's the camp of like, well, why are we donating to quote unquote art when we should be donating to give money to people who are impacted by the genocide? And my response to that is that the Zionists do both. Right? Like, the Zionists have the narrative or speak the narrative that there was a massacre of 1,200 people on October 7th, And then they went and they did an exhibit to commemorate and honor those people. Why can't we do the same?
Something that I was told once in business was that it takes 7 different times and 7 different ways for a message to finally sink in with people. And I don't know if that's necessarily true with this scenario, because as I've talked to people in my curiosity of what would it take for people to realize this is a genocide. Some people have mentioned to me that it's not about awareness anymore. Either you know or you don't, and you're either acknowledging it or you're not. And so from this point forward, it's not about, shaking somebody by the shoulders and getting them to wake up. It's about the struggle. It's about fighting for your right to humanity. I understand people saying we need to, like in soccer, we used to say, clear the ball. Like if you were getting crowded by offense, you need to just kick the ball to the other side of the field. You need to clear the ball just to get the boot off your neck, the pressure off. And then we can worry about everything else. And I understand that thinking and that philosophy, because it does feel overwhelming, I'm sure, with the images that we see every day, all day, that, this is the thing that nobody is stopping.
Yeah. I had this moment even today with the images that came out yesterday of the people being set on fire. And I thought to myself, like, is the work I'm doing really important right now? Because I just am like, how do I go ask people now for money for an exhibit? However, I also think that it's not just about awareness. It's about preserving the history. So when I think of like the Iraqi war, when I think of, I think Osama bin Laden is like, actually, let's talk about him. Osama bin Laden was a terrorist in America. This is how he was labeled, right? And then during this genocide, a supposed letter that was written by him came out to humanize him in some way. And people were like, actually, Osama bin Laden was onto something. He was just protecting his land. And like, there was this narrative circulating on TikTok, this narrative circulating on social media, and this like letter that he wrote. And like the New York Times had to actually remove this letter, right? And so like my point in saying that is that when I think of this exhibit, I think of preserving the story of Hind. Are they going to call her a terrorist? Like, what's going to happen to all of our shuhada? How are my kids going to learn about the shuhada? Is it going to be that they were terrorists and that they deserve it because of the October 7th killing? Or is it that the Balfour Declaration happened, the Naqba happened? What are we preserving? Because our history, as this genocide is happening, is being rewritten. There is an exhibit out there called the Nova exhibit for October 7th. So what are we doing to say, hey, this is what happened. This is the history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I guess anybody who's pushing back on the idea of an exhibit to preserve history and show the stories of real, actual children and their experiences is akin to reading a book. Why can't you write a book and say stop the genocide at the same time? It's not taking away from the other. If anything, it's adding a layer of our humanity to the conversation and the equation.
But it requires a mindset change and a culture change for the Arabs, because we are so used to being reactive. We have been oppressed for so long. Like you and I have had separate conversation about like 63, like the wars that have been happening, like actually 59, 63, 67, right? And then you get into like, and there's like the Hama massacre and the Lebanese civil war, and like we've been under oppression that we are in a constant state of survival. We are reactive. They bomb our country, we rebuild, right? For me, the exhibit is a proactive strategy where we teach people who we are, the beauty of our culture, our stories. And then when they go bomb our countries, they think, hey, I went to this exhibit, and that's not what happened. This is the history. Why are you bombing these people? These people aren't terrorists, right? But it's hard. It's hard to get a collective group of people out of a trauma response.
You just brought up a memory of the Iraq War and the looting that happened of Iraqi culture. I mean, this is like the cradle of civilization. And during both wars, but particularly the second war on Iraq, its antiquities were looted.
Yep.
They were looted. And I don't want to misquote some of the American companies that were involved in it by having, held on to some of these things that were stolen from the people of Iraq, their heritage. Hobby Lobby smuggling scandal.
This happened in Egypt too. This is what they do.
Yeah.
They bomb our countries, they take our resources, and they take our history, and then they go name one museum in Europe or in America that doesn't have some Egyptian mummy in it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your background in history and how you got started in this space of featuring voices from Gaza. First, tell me about you.
Yeah. So I'm a data scientist. Completely separate.
It's not funny, but it's funny, right?
It's funny. Yeah, it's really funny. You could say I had a mental breakdown and I just decided to go to art. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I was a data scientist, and the tech industry is now collapsing due to, COVID, what's happening in the war. People are losing their jobs left and right. I was impacted by 5 layoffs. For my 6th job, I actually quit because I could not go into work anymore and say, hey, Jimmy, did you look at the PowerPoint? And there's this ongoing genocide happening. I just could not do it. And I was like, I told myself, if I quit, I'm not getting a job again. Because, my industry collapsed. It's going to be so hard to find a job, maybe 6 months to a year job search. And while I was working that 6th job, I had started working with the Bulletproof Dream team to bring this exhibit to Houston. We had started working with an architect on our museum, and I was just always in meetings, either in meetings or at city council or different places. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to employ myself. This is something that I'm very passionate about. And I think also during that work when I had met the Bulletproof Dream team, during that work, we had actually went to all of the museums in Houston, and we had asked them to host our story. And we said, hey, can you host this exhibit? It's a $1.5 million exhibit. It's state-of-the-art material. It's very professionally done. It's not like I'm telling them to take something that's, and put it in the Museum of History. No, it's very professionally done. And I'm please host it. And we went to all of the museums. They told us that our work is a security threat. They told us that we would need added security. They told us that it's 5 years in order to get in. Some institutions blocked us. We had...
What do you mean institutions blocked you? They literally digitally blocked your email?
They blocked our email digitally.
What?
I actually do this in my pitch, my slide deck, where I show all of the blocked emails that we got. And actually all of those institutions, they weren't museums, they were city. They were city-based, where we pay taxes, centers that had blocked us. And they were you can't do this here. And I'm I pay tax dollars for this building. I pay for this building. What do you mean I cannot do this here? So, it was just I was so upset. I was so irritated. It was the first time that it was one of the first times that I realized that like my history, my culture, my heritage is under attack. It's not welcome here. And I was like, I'm not going back to corporate culture. And I am opening my own center, and we're gonna do this ourselves.
So, all right, in that context, I want to point out that you're based in Houston, and this is, if people don't know this, Houston is ethnically the most diverse city in North America. Like more than Toronto, more than New York. It represents more ethnicities, more countries of origin than any other city or metro population in the country.
We have 19 museums, and out of those 19, 10 of them have cultural centers. 10 different cultures have cultural centers.
So it almost sounds like they all united and said, we're going to, lay off this idea of featuring Gaza. Or do you think it was not coordinated, but just ignorance? Or where is the pushback coming from? Is it the donor class? Is it, when they say no, what are their reasonings?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the first thing is that actually in the last 5 years, this is the first time that we see Arab Americans pushing to tell their stories, right? So like you have the Museum of Palestinian People, I think in DC now. We've had the Arab American Museum, but the Arab American Museum in Michigan, I don't count because they solely focus on what it means to be Arab American. They'll never feature any history. And then I think there are other museums. There's one museum for Palestine in Connecticut. And then you have what I'm trying to build. There's also Ronnie, there's a young man named Ronnie in Chicago who's also trying to build a museum for Arabs. And this is like the first time ever where people are trying to build institutions around our culture. And so when the other museums see us standing up and stepping up and they don't know our history and they don't know our stories, they're like, whoa, all the information I have about Arabs is from the media, which we know that they don't paint as well. We as Arabs, and this is where we fail in my opinion, like we as Arabs have never really socialized with other cultures, right? Like, so for example, like for me, my interpretation of my community, at least in Houston, is that we're segregated within the Arab community, and then we don't even venture out into other communities. And if we do venture out into Arab communities, we hide our identity that we're Arab, right? We're always like Mo or Joe. We're not proud.
I'm laughing out of recognition personally because I've certainly done the nickname version as well. Like we have So
sorry. They don't know us. They literally think we're terrorists. Like I had an interview with someone from Katy, Texas on PBS, and I asked him, I said, what do you know about the Nakba? And he was like, is that a president of Palestine? So they're scared. They don't know what to do. And they're also not, in my opinion, they're not conscious. They don't know, they don't understand. I think there is maybe 50% of the American public that does understand that we're going through a genocide. I think the other 50% still has not processed that there is an ongoing genocide going on right now.
Interesting. I think I wouldn't dispute one way or another those numbers. I would say though that, for several months now, the overwhelming majority of Democrats and even the majority of all Americans who have been polled on this want an end to the genocide, or however it's phrased in the polling language.
But then you have Muslims like Ilhan Omar. I'm just gonna call her out. I'm really disappointed in her personally. I'm very disappointed in her, who was backing Kamala Harris when we have a whole uncommitted movement happening, or a third party movement happening, and these politicians are not. They're like, oh, we're anti-genocide, but then they are still giving the green light to our administration that it is okay to send these weapons.
Yeah, it does feel like an exceptionally disappointing generation of politicians.
But it's not their fault, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not their fault. It's our fault. We don't. This is the first time, maybe in the first 5 years, like Rashida Tlaib, monumental for our community. But this is like, she is the first Arab American. She's the first Arab to stand in a group of non-Arabs and advocate for being Arab, like openly. Like, we don't do this work. We don't go sit with politicians. We don't go to their campaign offices. We don't vote. And we definitely don't fund their campaigns.
You know, that's interesting because, I mean, I think you mentioned a committed movement. I mean, that particularly was started by people who said we're going to try to work the system from the inside.
Yeah, the ADC.
And Arabs have a position in American society that is a byproduct of us never having really proactively sold ourselves to Americans as being human just like them. And we've allowed media and government to reposition us as terrorists or the bad guy or just scary and foreign.
Well, that was the purpose of the Arab American Museum. Actually, like, you know, I'm very close with the people who built the Arab American Museum. I have so much respect for that institution. But it makes me sad that there had to be an institution dedicated to, hey, we're American too.
That's the whole thing that you hear from many Arab Americans who have said, I am exhausted by having to humanize myself and show you that I put my pants on the same way that you do, one leg at a time. But the reality is that genocidal language that started after October 7th proved that there is a huge, huge dehumanization of Arabs. And in this case, specifically the genocide that we're dealing with right now is against Palestinians. But I mean, this is kind of an open flowing conversation. When I think about Iraq, for example, and my last visit there a couple of years ago, it was just starting in earnest to, you know, get people back, to get visitors back, to get families back, to get expats back, to, you know, restore some of the investment or culture that it's known for. And there's part of me that just has in the back of my mind, it's like, it's just going to a hair trigger away from the West coming up with something to genocide, you know, to justify another bombing of Iraq. I mean, look at what's going on now. There are multiple Arab, yeah.
They have just not being reported on, but they're bombing Baghdad right now.
The strikes that are going on are underreported. But you know, to your point, it's happening now. It took 15 years for the American public to realize that they were lied to about Iraq's involvement in 9/11, which was non-existent. And, you know, here we are, you know, recovering from this horrible cycle. And to me, it's just a question of timing as to when another justification will be put out there to say we need to bomb this country for our own self-defense.
Oh, they will. They have no limit. I think what's interesting about what you said is that it took 10 years for Americans to realize, but also I'm an Arab and I still do not, like, I know we had the Iraq war. I can't tell you in detail history. And I'm just being honest with you. It's really embarrassing. I'm going to actually admit something else. I didn't know what the Naqaba was until 3 years ago. I didn't. I'm Arab. I didn't know. I cannot tell you, you know, I just know 9/11 happened. George Bush was like, we got to invade Iraq. And then they bombed Iraq. I didn't even know 1 million Iraqis died until maybe a year ago. And I'm Arab. So, like, if it's like we don't even know our own history, how do we even expect the Americans to know our, like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, who's telling that story of the Iraqi war? Who's capturing your narrative? Who's capturing your parents' narrative?
Yeah. We try. I'll tell you, like, personally, in our family, we've had to, you know, we've tried several occasions to record our parents and talk to them about different, you know, eras in their upbringing or their time here and what it was like for them. It really is worthy of a million documentaries because there are so many stories out there. There's no shortage of impressive stories that would like communicate not just the humanity, but just the real stories from the country, the region, the people.
Well, even like, what about like the political? What about Saddam Hussein? Like when I was doing work around Gamal Abdel Nasser, because
Mm.
my book covers a lot of Gamal Abdel Nasser. You have the history of like Gamal Abdel Nasser from the West, he's a hero. And then you have like the Egyptian, like if you go to Egypt and you talk to Egyptians about Gamal Abdel Nasser, they hate him. After the loss of Egypt during the 67 war, Gamal Abdel Nasser resigned. If you read Western history books, they paint him as like such an honorable man. Like he resigned from presidency because of like, you know, the war that he lost, and he, you know, he didn't want to, you know, this was like an honorable thing that he did. And then and then there was like some sort of protest to keep Gamal Abdel Nasser in.
Mm.
And like, then he stayed in power. But if you're Egyptian, you know that's typical playbook in Egypt of like, they probably just hired people from the army to go out and protest so that he could stay in power, right? But they're never going to write that in a Western textbook, right? And so like when I think about Saddam Hussein, there are people in Iraq who think of him as a hero. There are probably people in Iraq who hate him, right? But then my kids who grow up in the West are just going to know him as like evil to the point where it justified killing a million people.
Yeah. Speaking of Saddam, I remember many years ago I was backpacking through the region, actually mostly Europe, and had this opportunity to go into Morocco for the first time. So I took a boat, and you know, it was like backpacking, so you meet people along the way. And so I was with this odd mix of people, like from Kansas and California and Germany and England. And we just kind of stuck together for 2 or 3 cities on the train, just the sights and the sounds. And everywhere we went, you know, we'd be walking through the souk and the market, and the guys would come back and they're like, we met this really friendly person and they're going to invite us over for a couscous dinner in Morocco. And I'm like, they're trying to sell you carpet. And they're like, no. They were really authentic. And we'd always get roped into like these stores where they would like put on the pressure. And it was like, oh, you don't have to buy anything. But if you were going to buy something, which one would it be? And every time, and I was like, I noticed after like the third time that they would like never try to sell me. Mm-hmm. Like they were like going after the Westerners, and they would look at me, and even though I'm American and born and raised in the States, they would finally look at me and they'd be like, where are you from? And I'd say, oh, I'm born in the States and my background is Iraqi. And again, this is many years ago, and Saddam was still in power. And half of the time they would be like, Saddam Hussein. Like they admired him in a lot of the Arab world. I don't want to, you know, take that one example and say everywhere in the Middle East, but I understood it as them supporting somebody who was standing up to America.
In Egypt, he's a hero. In Egypt, Saddam is a hero.
Yeah.
There's different interpretations of, but then that begs the question is like, who was he really?
I could talk a lot about some of these Iraqi moments for a lot, but I'll bring one more up in terms of the stories that are available to us that need to be told. So, you know, I went a couple of times as a younger person, as a child, even as a teenager. I went, you know, as a unaccompanied minor to Iraq when I was a kid, when it was obviously safer to do something like that. And it was the trip of a lifetime. And I was so lucky at a very young age to be on my own with family in Baghdad at that time of my life. You know, I saw a little bit of everything, the different cities. And one of the features of Iraq is that Najaf is the city that has basically it's cemetery. It's cemetery, and it's an ancient mosque, and it's got lots of history to it, but basically it is the holy place for people to be buried in Iraq, and it's got a lot of religious tourism because of some very special ties in Najaf. And so we have family buried there. And I have vague memories of it as a younger person, but when I went back 2 years ago, aside from the fact that it goes on for miles, like just the extenuation of these plots and burial grounds and things like that, the thing that was different was that there were posters all over the place of the people who were buried at that particular tombstone.
Wow.
But it was like not just one or two, but it was like hundreds or thousands as far as the eye could see.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking my cousins at the time, I'm like, is this new? And, you know, it hadn't occurred to them that this had slowly kind of crept into the appearance of Najaf, of the cemeteries over time. To me, I noticed it right away because I saw a lot of babies in the pictures and children and young men. So to me, it like represented, you know, killings of America's war on Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, these aren't like natural death occurrences of people older in age who have died of natural causes or, you know, heart disease or diabetes. These were babies. And it was like a Xerox of different babies. It was just like, that's how many babies were pictured at graves. And then when I compare it to what's going on right now in Gaza, I mean, a lot of these babies are being vaporized or they're not given a burial.
It's the same book. They don't change strategy. It works for them. They haven't changed strategy for years. Same children. You know what's also very interesting about what you said is that when you saw pictures of babies, you were automatically triggered to think war, because that's how they kill us, is they kill our children, because they don't. This is also like, I mean, I think also the importance of having kids. I always tell like my guy friends, just get married. Like really honestly, because they're to erase our culture. They want to erase our culture, they want to erase our history, and they want to erase our heritage. And the way they do that is by killing our children, right? So that we don't continue to reproduce. It's like, in my opinion, like every Arab should get married and have kids. Just like as a form of resistance. And this is what you see in Palestine, actually. Like you have Palestinian women after their sons are getting killed, who are saying, it's okay, we're going to go make more. Like we're going to have more kids. Because they understand the importance of preserving our lineage, and they understand why they kill our kids.
903 bloodlines were wiped off the civil registry in the past year in Palestine, in Gaza.
Yes.
903 lineages, families, entire families ended forever in Gaza. Families, not 903 people, but 903 family lines ended in this last year, being killed completely in Gaza in the last year.
You have even Arabs who don't understand what that means. I remember in the protest too, when you were at the protest, did you see that they would bring those papers, like those long papers of all of the people that had died? There were, you know, and some of those families, their lineages that had been erased, they would like hold up signs to remember them. And you have Arabs that still do not understand the importance of having children.
I gotta tell you, this was not on my bingo card, having this conversation, talking about the importance of having kids no matter what. But
my Arab auntie and me. I always try to tell my friends, like, you gotta get married.
Well, I got to tell you, I think the number one thing that triggers me, like you said, aside from like the example of walking through the cemetery in Najaf and seeing hundreds of photos as far as the eye could see of babies over grave markers, is what I've been seeing on my social media over the last year in Gaza. Yeah. It is unconscionable. It is not self-defense. It is clear genocide, an attempt to exterminate a people from a land. Ethnic cleansing is a polite term. It's extermination. Mm-hmm. And I can't reconcile it with anything other than this is just the darkest time that we're in modern history, and many people will not acknowledge this until years later, and I think they're going to have a different understanding or memory of how they felt about it while it was going on in real time.
I think the psychological ramifications of this war on not just like Palestinians, but like Arabs living in America is at least 10 plus years. I mean, like, how do you process a genocide? You know, like I have one of my very, very good friends goes in and out of the White House to advocate for Arabs. He is like the Kerry Washington for the Arabs. Yesterday, the images came out, and this is like a man who just doesn't break down. He's like a machine. He just goes. And he texted me, and he was like, I can't do this. Like, you know, for I think for like an Arab man and his like 45, 50 to like have that moment, like, you know, a man who's like carrying our community right now, to have that moment, that's just like, you know, it's impacting people in ways that they did not even imagine to be impacted in. And like, people don't know how to process. I don't know how to process this. Like I mean, for me personally, I mean, I don't know about you. I have mental breakdowns. Like I have a mental breakdown at work. I think I told you too, we filmed, I'm also on a show on Hulu. It's coming out. We filmed the first week of the genocide. I was almost suicidal filming because I have to film, and then I'm watching my people get obliterated by these rockets on TikTok. And it's like, how do you even go about feeling, you know what I'm saying? There's not even, I don't even think there's psychological, like I don't even think there's like research, like to train therapists on how to help people overcoming watching a genocide.
Yeah, we've never seen it streamed on our phones like this before.
No.
We've been sheltered from the horrors of this. And, you know, to address, like, how do you deal with this? I don't know that there's one answer or that there is an answer at all. And I ask people all the time, what is it how do you cope mentally? And then you feel guilty for trying to find a coping mechanism because you know that your mental state doesn't compare to the mental state of being constantly in Gaza.
Yeah.
You know, in a zone of genocide.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you can't help yourself, you can't help other people. And so we have to do the things that affirm life. And you mentioned one of those strategies before, which is like have babies, which I think it's life affirming, right? It's the idea of proliferating the human race and making sure that you don't get extinguished. I think there's something deeply genetic about the idea of that. And if we're programmed to carry on our lines, then that's part of it. It's a dark time that we're in.
Yeah. And I think also going back to a form of resistance, the basic form of resistance, I ask anyone this, the basic form of resistance, have kids, learn your language. You know, like I have friends that protest, they don't speak Arabic. And that's okay, I'm not judging. But like they're erasing your language. I mean, this is, you know, they're erasing it. They're, you know, they're calling hummus. Have you seen those videos where they like, what did they say? Like they say Allah is their word or something like that. Or there are certain words that they take from us. I don't know.
I haven't seen this. No.
There's like certain words that they take from us. And I think they took that, you know, that song that Mohammed Assaf, I think that's his name.
Yeah.
Dami Falastini.
Yeah.
I think they like took that song. They say like Yalla is their word.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
They appropriate it.
appropriating. Yeah.
Yeah, like preserve your culture, preserve your language.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm not fully on board with the kids thing, but yeah, I hear you, I don't have kids, but I get what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, look, we're just in such a messed up place in time, and I don't think most people would ever, necessarily think in those terms. And you see about declining birth rates all over the world, largely in Western European cultures, and sure, they have all the creature comforts of life, and they've dealt with low declining birth rates by accommodating immigration, to keep the average of their population young enough to perpetuate the society in the country that they're in. But they resent the immigrants, and they run into all sorts of problems of racism. Look at Germany as one of the issues that's going on right now, is that they have the largest Palestinian diaspora outside of, in Europe, I would say. I don't know if it's in the world, but you have 40 to 50,000 Palestinians in Berlin, I've been told, and they've made protest illegal. And they've told, a liberal left of center government has told its population that, they think mass deportations is the answer. I mean, this is just classic playbook racism, and the fact that it's in Germany is such a shame, because it's not like they haven't done stuff like this before that didn't lead to worse things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I will say on the language thing, the thing that I've tried to overcome my entire adult life has been learning Arabic, more than ordering appetizers or getting into trouble by mispronouncing something that is actually a bad word when I didn't think it was.
Arabic language, you mess one letter up and it's a different word.
Oh yeah. I've learned that the hard way a few times. But, I grew up in a town that considered itself to be progressive and multicultural. And I'll say it, it's Evanston, Illinois. It's just north of Chicago. And I actually interviewed a former librarian from the Evanston Public Library who was there for 20 years and who was essentially, they made her life miserable because she invited a Palestinian speaker 10 years ago and then got some sort of pressure to quote unquote postpone it, which meant kick the can down the road and make it never happen. And it blew up in their faces. And then they lied about her, threw her under the bus. And 3 years later, she left with a settlement because they just had all sorts of proof on file that they had lied about her and done all of these things to nefariously cancel a Palestinian. So
what event was that?
This was in 2014, and the author was Ali Abu Nima, who is the co-founder of Electronic Intifada, and he had just recently written a book that he was going to read a passage from, and it was a series that was programmed and ready to go. When she was told to tell him that it was being postponed, he knew exactly what was going on. He said, I'm going to consider this to be censorship of my work, and I will not stand for it. And basically, he tweeted it, and then all of a sudden it became a much bigger news story. And they, under pressure, eventually put him back on the calendar after lots of back and forth. But they threw her under the bus, the librarian, in the process. You can listen to the whole episode because it's a fascinating story about that. But what I'll say about Evanston, as we were talking about learning Arabic, is that my school teachers growing up literally would tell my parents in parent-teacher conferences, they would say, hey, we noticed, Hazem, he stumbled on a word the other day when we were doing this exercise. You're not speaking Arabic at home still, are you? Because, you don't want him growing up with a disadvantage or with an accent or stupid. Those were their words. So this, and I've, been living in California for decades now, and people my age, my peers of Mexican background, this is a very similar story to them. There was a woman I worked with, she would tell me, my grandmother would hit me if I tried to speak Spanish because this was the environment. This was the political environment. And there is a generation of people in the Hispanic community who I think it's completely changed now. I mean, I think, there's this cultural reversion that many young adults have in the US in your mid-20s often. And it's when you're thinking about settling down with family or having kids. And around those ages, people tend to, after having walked from their cultural background because they wanted to fit in and completely assimilate, all of a sudden now are more interested in their cultural background, their language, their culture, their food, their roots. So I think the idea of separating humans, children, from their ethnicity, which is a beautiful thing to, embrace and celebrate, it backfires eventually. Because look at me, I'm like, all about my Arab background and heritage. That doesn't make me any less of an American. It doesn't make me any less of a human.
Arab either.
Yeah. So, I mean, there has been, and it's probably coming back a little bit. You see a lot of the, library bannings or efforts in places like Texas and Florida where they just, they come up with a slogan and they call talking about slavery. All of a sudden it's critical race theory, and critical race theory is something that Fox News will repeat 100 times as being the devil incarnate. And then all of a sudden people who have no idea what critical race theory is about, which has a large part about teaching honest studies about our history with slavery, it becomes this political third rail, which is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So these are all related concepts that I'm, happy that we're having a conversation about finally. But I think these are things that keep people from, the advantages of learning another language, being able to translate, being able to, appreciate multiple cultures. Ironically, I speak Spanish better than I speak Arabic, but for the love of God, I'm going to learn Arabic before I die. I promise.
Got it. It's who you are.
It is.
Yeah.
Among many things, like you. So, well, this has been a fascinating story. I want to make sure that everybody goes to the Substack or check out the podcast notes of this podcast, because we'll have all the links. We'll have your socials to follow to make sure that they get all of your updates and information on the Bulletproof Dreams Exhibit and its mission. Support the arts, support literature, support storytelling, because ultimately, facts and figures only go so far. We have to be able to communicate with each other on levels that people relate to. Mm-hmm. And so I commend you for, this exhibit, what's been put together. I will be there in Houston when it opens up.
Things it will open. We gotta keep that.
Yeah, you have to visualize it. You have to manifest it for sure.
Yes.
And congratulations for the work that you're doing for humanity.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for having me on this podcast, and thank you so much for sharing your story with me. And I'm really happy we talked about the Iraq War too, because I think it's a huge part of what's happening in Gaza right now.
It's all related, and human nature is to forget things so quickly, and that doesn't have to be the case.
Yes, insan. It means forgetful.
Yeah. I do a segment where we do this thing called the shout out, where we basically call out people who are doing good things, or companies or institutions or things that are positive that are happening in the world that would benefit from a little bit of light shown on them. And I definitely feel like people need to check out the Bulletproof Dreams Child Painters Exhibit link, which I'll put on the Substack. I'm going to also shout out a documentary called War Crimes in Gaza. It's the Al Jazeera investigations video. It's on YouTube. It's free. It really puts in perspective and gives you a clear timeline of everything that's been happening in a way that is mind-blowing. And I think a lot of people are too scared to go look at images if they're not naturally seeing them on their feed, or they think that it's overwhelming to look at something that's a couple of hours. But it really is, as documentaries go, it's not just shock from start to finish. It has images that are strong, but it also comes with a timeline that helps people understand where we are today. And I think that'll be beneficial to set aside time to get out of the mindset of watching 4-second or 20-second videos that are rewiring us to have this rage or anger or depression or feeling helpless, but to see something contextually for an entire segment, I think would be really good for people. So War Crimes in Gaza, the Al Jazeera investigation, I'll include a link in the podcast notes and the Substack. So please go to Arabs in Media for that. What would you like to, or who would you like to do a shout out for?
Okay. I think, I don't know, have you heard of the Arab Defense Council? The
ADC.
Yeah, the ADC.
Yeah.
Actually, the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee. No, it's the Arab Defense Council.
All these letters, they're so confusing.
I know, all these letters. Actually, yeah. But I want to shout them out, actually, because they're doing a lot of good work, especially during the time of the election. My friend Abid Ayoub is the executive director of the ADC, and he just doesn't sleep. And he is in and out of meetings with White House staff advocating for us. And he's doing really great work, especially with what's happening in Lebanon right now. And he doesn't even have a moment to process what's happening. And he's going in and advocating for Lebanese Americans so that they can come home, so that we don't see what's happening in Gaza happen in Lebanon. And so they're actually having Arab Con in California.
Really?
Yes, October 26th in Anaheim. Go, Hazmal, we can meet. Go.
This month?
Yeah, this month.
Oh, this is great, because there was something that was going on in Dearborn the same weekend. Are you sure?
So I think there's the Arab, there is something going on in Dearborn, but ADC is also happening. They're having a smaller Arab Con in California. So
the one in Dearborn is called Connect Arab America. It's an empowerment summit, and it includes the 40 Under 40 awards.
Yeah.
And a few seminars that talk about everything from identity to entrepreneurship to media. I think I wanted to go to that, and now I know why the forces were not aligning to help me get there, because it looks like I should be going to Orange County.
Yeah, I mean, you can pick, and if you're in Orange County, let me know, and I'll come say hi to you.
Okay.
I'll get to say hi to you.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. And we'll all go to Sababa Falafel Shop, which is Palestinian owned, in Garden Grove, which is one of my top 3 falafel places in California.
Okay, we're going to have to see if it's good, because I actually hate falafel.
Oh, no. Well, come on. Egyptian falafel is so different that I wouldn't blame you for hating it.
No, but it's not because of that. It's because my mom cooked it so much when I was a child that I couldn't eat it anymore.
Yeah.
Because it was like the healthy version of a hamburger.
Oh, is that the reason for having it?
That was the reason.
No, the reason for having falafel needs to be because it's delicious and it's perfected with a crunchy exterior and a fluffy interior and just the right amount of spices and all the toppings in the world.
Yeah. Okay, so then I need to try it your way in California. And so I think you're coming.
Yeah.
See each other in California. It's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
See, I need to be on the right algorithm to know about these things.
I'll send you the info for the tickets and stuff, and then just let me know.
That sounds good. Yeah, for sure. Oh, this is exciting because, for the last 2 days, I've been trying to square away flights to get me to change up some other travel plans to make sure that I could be in Dearborn for this one. And I would love to go to that one, but, now I know why.
Date? I thought is it a weekend? I mean, I have a lot of friends, if we're doing shout outs, Omar Kurdi, Arab American Professionals in Ohio, Cleo, the first, Egyptian lieutenant, Bayan, all of these people are getting awards. But, I didn't know it was the same weekend.
Well, we'll compare dates and calendars to make sure that we're talking about the same things. But yeah, the summit in Dearborn, I was going to try to go to because I was going to be in the region around that date, but I had already bought my ticket to return early, and so I've been trying forever. Anyway, it looks like one way or another we'll meet, whether it's in Orange County or at the opening of your exhibit. But we we have work to do um, to help people hear the stories of our people.
We do. Thank you so much for shedding light on the Bulletproof Dreams exhibit, and I will see you in California.
That sounds good. Remember to subscribe to the Substack Arabs in Media. We'll have all the links there. Please support independently produced podcasts and Substacks. That's it for Arabs in Media. And remember, Habibi, genocide is always wrong.